Are you talking about some sort of statewide planning process for renewables? How do you tell, for example, how do you tell someone in Lowell that it's now their responsibility to do their little bit for climate change when they don't want to have the wind towers there?
You know, I just think that we need a plan. And frankly, you could write the existing energy plan of the last few years even on a napkin. That's always do what we've always done. Because what we've always done is what we must always do. That's the end of the napkin. If you do one of those little napkins you get on US Air, you need a big one. And that's not a plan. But this is what I'd say about wind. I'd say, let's pick, I bet we've got the brain power right in this room. We had a few other people, let's pick all the places in Vermont that we've never built wind, because those natural resources are just too precious. And I'm going to ask Deb Markowitz to help lead that effort along with the department. Then, let's designate areas where we will build wind together. Let's get that done. And then let's make sure of the following, that any wind project has to be voted by the local community that hosts it permanently. If it passes, as it did in Lowell, we build it, and if it doesn't, we don't. That we have a tax structure so that any benefit accrues to the people that live closest to those wind turbines. And finally, that we have a decommissioning fund set up, a real one, not like the one in Louisiana designed, but a real one. And when those become inefficient, we take them down because we move into other renewable sources of power. So I want to welcome Paul Markowitz here. Thank you for joining us, Paul. I know the kids would be here if they didn't actually have to go to school.
Can you, speaking of decommissioning, can you talk a bit about the situation in Texas with the outgoing members of the compact voting to expand that dump? And do you have concerns that that expansion will leave us scrambling for space in that dump eventually?
I absolutely do, and I think it's imprudent of Vermont and for Vermont, who's had the foresight with the state of Texas to ensure that we have a place to put our low-level nuclear waste, to give it away to other states. And, you know, I have said before that there are 103 aging nuclear power plants in America, and I don't think that they're going to run as long as the owners say they're going to. And when they don't, and they are decommissioned, there's going to be a race for space, and the first in wins. So Vermont had the foresight with the state of Texas. We tried to get Maine involved, but they didn't join us in the end, to ensure that we had a place to put our waste. Now, it doesn't seem to me that you have to be too politically sensitive. Answer this question. How many of you would like to have nuclear waste stored in your backyard? Raise your hand. And I think that when Texas starts to look closely at that, they're likely to have a similar reaction as other states do. We don't want it in ours. And that's why we're not at Yucca Mountain. That's why we have nowhere to put the waste. So my view is that the folks who are voting, scrambling before I become governor, frankly, to ensure that all the other states get access to our waste site are not thinking of Vermonters.
So how do you want to do that?
Well, let's just see if we can slow it down first. I mean, there's a lot of issues bubbling here, you know, when it comes to energy and the plant in Vernon. This is one of them.
But can commissioners you appoint re-vote on that?
Well, I would urge them not to make a binding decision, because I think that we should rethink it.
What job do you have in mind for Matt Dunn?
Well, Matt's already helping us, and I'm very grateful to him, he's working with a very small group of people to come back with an overall plan to deliver on the promise of delivering broadband and cell service to every last mile by 2013. He's been an extraordinary resource in those discussions. Matt would be a great servant to Vermont. I don't know what he chose to do, but he has 3 young children and a job with Google that I understand he intends to stay with.
Is this what we're seeing with your appointments, sort of where there's a person at the top who may be relatively new to the agency, but someone very close under them who knows the programs, knows the laws? I'm thinking Commerce, ANR, and AHS, although obviously Senator Racine knows a lot, but I mean, are you trying to balance the need to have someone from outside on top and then someone in the inside who knows the laws and the programs?
You know, it's challenging to put together a cabinet, and it's been incredibly exciting. We have a really great team doing it. There are a lot of things that you try to balance, but you can't overthink it. You know, the bottom line is you try to find the best person that you possibly can in terms of their intellect, their understanding of Vermont, and their ability to get tough things done, and you hire them. And that's what I've done every single time. If you can weave a pattern into it, I'd say you ought to work on a different story, but you don't have enough to do.
Have you read a book called Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin?
I haven't.
You have not?
No.
It's interesting and might bear some similarities to what's
You
going
know,
on.
the only thing I say about that, the whole Team of Rivals thing, I know you all don't believe this, but there were no rivals in the Democratic nomination for governor of the state of Vermont. I tell you that. I would have walked away on August 25th, extraordinarily proud to have had any of the 4 other candidates that were running as my nominee. I would have worked tirelessly for them. Now, I couldn't have afforded to work for them after that, but I would have been with them all the way. And, you know, I think the extraordinary thing about the primary was there were no rivals. We had a really fascinating discussion about the future of Vermont. In those discussions, and how many did you do, Deb, 60?
60 something.
You know, I decided that I had 4 of the smartest people in the state of Vermont next to me. And if I won for the governorship, I wanted to have them on the team because we need smart people to do great things. And we share a common vision. We have extraordinary experience together. So, you know, the rival thing just doesn't fly here. We were friends in the beginning, we're friends at the end. I'm not doing this because I'm trying to bring in a team of rivals. I'm making these decisions because I'm hiring the best that Vermont can hire to get the job done. We've got a lot to do.
Did you just say that you wouldn't have taken a job in state government because you couldn't have afforded to, but you're expecting the
Well,
more?
I feel badly about that. Well, listen, maybe I should retract that, but I wouldn't. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I think that anyone who works for the state of Vermont is leaving an opportunity in the private sector where they could make more money. Let's be honest about this. They come to these jobs because they care deeply about Vermont. They love this state. They want us to have the best government in the country, which we do. And they're really dedicated more to the state than they are to their pocketbooks. And I spend a lot of time on a telephone convincing the people that you've been seeing march down these stairs over the last few days to come down and in many cases take big pay cuts. But I think the beauty of Vermont is we have a lot of folks who are willing to do this. That's why our government is so great.
Deb, did you spend any time talking with the governor-elect about the treasurer's position?
We had conversation about a lot of different positions, and I agreed to serve in this capacity because I believe I have something truly to offer. I actually do have background in environmental law. In law school, I had won an environmental law prize, even wrote some handbooks for municipalities on Vermont's environmental laws and Vermont's permitting process. So I've got a background in environmental law, but really what I bring is my background in management. Right now, we need a CEO who can get that agency back on track. It will be a flagship agency for the state of Vermont, but there needs to be some strong leadership that supports the mission of the agency while also changing the culture so that it becomes a customer service culture. And I can do that. So I'm very excited about this opportunity.
And in 2 years, what are the benchmarks that you're going to look to determine whether or not you have accomplished that?
Well, the steps that I'm going to take is to start with, and this is the same thing I did as Secretary of State, is I met with staff, I met with the constituents that deal with the agency, both the environmental groups, the businesses and developers who rely on the agency for permits, to find places of commonality, but also to get a sense of the workflow of the agency, because there are a lot of innovative changes we can make. I can't tell you what they are yet, but I know that they're there. And I know that because I've heard stories about where things are going wrong. And so the benchmarks that I hope to see in 2 years is staff morale that's improved, where the people working in the agency feel as though you know, there's management that cares about them and about the mission of the agency, that people who use the agency services feel as though they're being treated well in the process, even though they may not be happy with the outcome of a particular permit, but they feel like they've been respected in the process, and that the environmental community feels and knows that it's a real partner as we plan and vision for the future.
Nuts and bolts, how many employees in the agency and what is its budget?
That is a good question, and I don't know with after the cuts, but it's, I believe it has been around 500. I haven't seen the most recent numbers before the cuts. I bet Alex can get you that information now.
What is David Mears' situation? Is he leaving Vermont Law School temporarily? You said on loan.
David, can you comment about whether Vermont Law School is loaning you or whether they'll ever get you back? Can you hear the question?
Can
Can I quote you on that?
It sounded Chinese.
David, we seem to have a technical difficulty, but thank you for that. We're going to assume that, Matt, you can always get a job there if you want one, but you're planning to stick with us for a long time. Is that right?
It takes a lot of bandwidth.
I'm not working it now. I hope this need to go back.
Your Mandarin has gotten a lot better. I gotta give you that.
Can I go back
Thank you
to...
so much for joining us today. We'll be back with more good news this week, I'm sure. And thank you so much. Thank you, David, and we'll get